come to the end of the day at WordCamp Bristol, and I'm joined with two friends, Elliot and Richard, from Meetup in Cheltenham, WordPress Meetup.
Hello.
Hello. And we thought we'd just go through a few key talks and pull out some of the extracts from the day. First up was a talk on Gutenberg by David Darke from Atomic Smash. I thought this was, I haven't used a lot of Gutenberg, so a lot of it went over my head, actually, if I'm honest. But it was a really good talk. I thought he was a good speaker, actually. One of the key things that came out for me is actually thinking about testing Gutenberg and thinking about when you're building all of the units, of the blocks within Gutenberg, and about how you might test those and make sure they're going to work. And he recommended a really good plugin for that, actually, I think it's called Block Unit Testing for Gutenberg. What that does is create a new page and pulls out all the blocks and then lists them on that page so you can view through it. I think you came to that talk as well.
Yeah, I did, and I took a picture of that, so I'm going to try that out, test it when I get back. But I think the interesting thing about that talk was the way that the impact of Gutenberg has had on business owners, freelancers. It's kind of been the same. He was talking about stuff that was very familiar to me. So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting talk, and that plugin, definitely going to try that. He also mentioned the AFC, the way that you can use advanced custom fields to create blocks. But so coming from a PHP development background, that is a godsend. That's my takeaway from it. So I'm looking forward to using that.
I also found it interesting that he worked in a similar way to that I work with ACF, and there was a few things that I picked up on. The way that he works with ACF before Gutenberg, I was like, oh, that's interesting, and how Gutenberg's kind of replaced ACF in a way, but it's still applicable for certain uses, so that was quite good.
That's right, he actually used that the ACF plugin as a way to transition into developing their own Gutenberg blocks and facilities within that.
Kind of library of blocks, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it was a nice idea, really, because it wasn't so scary at that point. They said, well, let's embrace Gutenberg, let's start building in it, and actually, ACF was developed enough, and the plugin had a lot of documentation that you could use then to create your own blocks. So I thought it was very good.
Yep.
The next one I saw was from Lizzie. She actually works at Dyson at the moment, and it's all about legacy systems in your head. And I think where it came from is talking about fear. Where does fear come from? I think one of her examples was flying, and about how every time she went on a flight that she would get scared, and she tried lots of different things from like an EasyJet flying test, where they go on and explain everything that's happened, all the noises it's making, hypnotherapy, neurolinguistic programming, that sort of stuff she tried. But I think one of the things she found, really, if you're fearful about something, is to not focus on the fear aspect of it, but focus on the reward. So what you can do in a situation to get a reward out of it, because then that will have an effect where it's going to push that fear down over time.
Yes, just make the anxiety kind of suppressed and handle it better, I guess.
Yeah.
But exercise again was another one. So just taking yourself away, go for a walk. That was the biggest talk for me. Sorry.
I thought that talk was not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be about like old PHP systems and all this. I was like,
legacy.
But it is kind of. She didn't really touch on that as much, but I can kind of see that she was saying that sometimes when you get old projects or you inherit projects, you're like, oh, I don't want to work on this because it's going to be horrible, and it's that fear of working on something that you're not quite sure of. And it's the same in terms of like running a business, a client ringing up and giving you feedback. She said something about it brings on that fear.
There are
like,
certain
I've got some feedback for you. Like, oh, don't want feedback. It's that fear of I've got to do something to sort that. So
I think we've all got clients as well that as soon as we know who it is, we've all got those clients, I'm sure.
Yeah, their name pings up in your email and you're like, oh.
Those awkward clients.
It's not that I have any awkward clients.
It's at that point you need to shut down, go for a walk, or meditate maybe for 10 minutes.
Or focus on the positives, not on the fear, and just realise it's your brain telling you that it's your fear.
You're really good at
your
this.
adrenaline. I'm not.
You are. You know what you're talking about. You sound really good.
I really enjoyed that.
I think
I did. I think today that was the biggest takeaway for me.
It was. As she also said, you can reward yourself with food, obviously healthy snacks.
Healthy snacks.
And I like the idea of that.
No, healthy snacks, not just snacks.
Yes.
What else do we look at? There was a great talk by Rachel McCollin, who I remember from back in the days when we just started Rather Inventive. And I think she just started her WordPress development that she's doing. And she came to one of my talks. I don't think she remembers me. but she came to one of my talks on search optimization or something like that. So it's really nice to see her again, and she's really developed. She's talking about multi-site WordPress and why it's good. We don't do any multi-site WordPress development, but I was very interested in how we can take that forward.
Yeah, I think you probably took more away from that than anybody. But I think, yeah, exploiting multi-site is a good channel for anybody.
Yeah.
Using WordPress.
Yeah.
It has so many benefits.
I think so.
Updating one set of plugins for 10 sites as opposed to logging into 10 sites and updating those plugins. I know that there are that kind of WP Manage, I think, is the service you can use for. I'm doing that thing with my hands again.
We talked about this earlier, about how when we do presentations that we move around it quite a lot.
You've got to animate. What did I take from Multisite? I know a little bit about Multisite, but it's not something I've kind of done a lot with, but I can kind of see the benefits of it, and spoke to Elliot about kind of how the user bits work, so you can get your users into one place and kind of then create these separate sites. So I can see the benefits of it, but it's not something.
There's a lot of benefits. We're hoping to do redevelopment of a site at the moment for a client, and they've got 3 separate departments, and it was going to be 3 separate websites, but actually multi-site would work very well because it's one business with 3 separate departments, separate customers, but actually there's a lot of crossover in the news and the blog that they write.
Yeah.
So having something where it's all in one database allows us to pull content from one site to the other.
Broadcasting from one to another, yeah.
I think that could work quite well.
The other interesting thing I think was touched on was like events. So for most WordCamps, they have they happen yearly. So they have a separate website for each year event. And I thought that was quite interesting. It makes total sense. You know, it's the same site, but you just create a new site so the content can, and you just leave it up there. So, and it made me think about another project that I've got running that I will try and exploit again this year. So I won't plug it now though.
Well, I was definitely into it from the time saving. Anything where I can just update plugins once, I'm happy with.
Yeah, it's got to be a benefit, right?
What else? I don't know if you saw some different ones at this time, but I moved on to custom WordPress themes to save your sanity.
No, that's what I went to as well.
That was by Jonny Allbut from a company called Wider. I thought this was really good. He was talking about how when they take on a client project and all the way through really the whole of their project system. But a couple of the things that I pulled out from it are to really get a handle on the color palettes, the visuals, the image ratio before you start moving forward with development. Because if you start moving forward on that and you then have to backtrack, that becomes very expensive in terms of time.
Yeah.
So it's really, if you can get a handle on at least the ratio sizes, what colors you're using, and try and fix down as much as possible without restricting it too much, it's definitely a good way forward.
I think the biggest thing to take away was in business, especially in this business, you need to be competitive in terms of price. So you need to get something up and running quite quickly. Having a framework that he demonstrated made a lot of sense. It's kind of the same thing, but it's very stripped back, and he can get up and running relatively quickly. So you're not repeating yourself doing stuff. So don't repeat yourself in terms of development, code development. But I think the biggest takeaway for me, I'm aware of the Alfred app, but Alfred automation I wasn't aware of. So for me,
so explain Alfred a little bit for anyone who doesn't know.
It's kind of like a search tool. I think it's a search tool.
Don't know anything about it. No, I can't lie.
But I don't know really.
I think it's an app that you run on your Mac.
Yes, it's a Mac.
And it allows you to, by typing in short commands, you can then run other applications, processes, scripts. Is that right?
Initially, I thought it was just like a search on steroids, but there's automation involved. So yeah, a couple of keystrokes, you can make stuff happen. Like you can install a local environment for your WordPress, pull a repository down or framework that you use, which is kind of, so these kind of processes that we go through that we tend to do on a daily basis, a weekly basis. When a new client project comes up, you have to repeat that, and if you can save minutes, hours.
I think that's the biggest takeaway I had. He had a lot of processes to get a WordPress install how he wants to run quite quickly, like the typography page, and it sets up.
I like the idea of that, actually.
And it's deleting all the kind of plugins that you don't want, and it's run a command and it's doing everything for you, and then you can kind of crack on with building it, which takes a lot of time probably to get that initial theme built. Yeah. But once you've probably spent a couple of days getting that process and that theme built, it's saving you hours in the long run to I've got a new project, run it up and away you go.
A typical example is like when you install WordPress, it defaults to the post ID in the permalinks. So always that's one task. It always repeats. So you've got to log in, go to that page, and then set it, save it.
Yeah,
So if
it's
you can
changing
automate that,
your reading settings to not your blog post to have a specific
home
page
page
and all
and
that
blog
kind of
post,
little
yeah,
things that you do
yeah.
that probably take you 30 seconds maybe to kind of automate everything and package it into
Yeah.
one.
Yeah,
install.
just looking for those opportunities, so you're just not repeating yourself all the time.
Yeah.
The last one I want to touch on, but you might want to pick up some others. It was called The Art of Problem Solving by Ben Everard from the Idea Bureau. The Idea Bureau. I thought this was a great talk.
Didn't go.
Yeah, you did go.
Went to the other one, so
Oh,
we can.
So it's just me. Okay, so on this one, he was talking just generally about problems that could be applied to anything. He had some WordPress examples. The key thing I took from this, and I've thought about looking at tasks in this way, but when you have problems, is to write them down. That's the very first thing, is to write them down, get them out of your head, because then they become real. You can share them with people. But once they're out of your head, is to look at them on an impact effort scale. You look at a problem and say, is that going to be low effort and high impact? Because if it is, let's do it. It's worth doing. If it's going to be low impact and high effort, maybe we should leave that alone for now, or at least push it out of the way. And it makes so much sense, because I think a lot of people, when they encounter problems or challenges, they'll just do them. They'll just sort of rattle through their list. But actually saying, that's great, write them down by all means, but then prioritize them. Make sure you're spending your time on the right things. Something else that he pulled out that was really interesting is called rubber duck programming, which I've heard before, but I've not looked into.
Really love that.
Yeah?
Really good.
New one on
Would you want to explain the idea?
It's the best. It really does work. So I do quite a lot of programming, and I work by myself programming wise. And if you've got a issue with programming, you talk to the rubber duck and explain the project.
Rubber duck.
It doesn't have to be a rubber duck. It could be another person, but they don't need to understand. You just need to kind of start with, this is my problem, and this is why it's not working. What am I doing wrong? And a lot of the times, by you explaining it's not working, why isn't, you can kind of, your brain works it out for itself.
kind of unravel
So you don't
it.
need to necessarily talk to somebody. You just need to talk to a rubber duck about this. This is what I'm trying to achieve.
Okay,
this
that's
is why it's
interesting.
not working.
Yeah.
I've tried this, and then a lot of the times your brain will go, "Oh, you haven't done this," and then
It
sorts out the
becomes
problem.
clearer.
Yeah,
Kind of unravel it.
yeah. Just
So
by
there was
talking
an
out
ad
loud.
by a brand, a communication brand. I think one of the strap lines was, "It's good to talk." So it's kind of like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they call it rubber duck programming, but you could use it for anything.
Yeah.
You have when I find myself, when I'm taking the dog for a walk, and I've got a problem, I'll be talking to the dog about it.
Yeah.
So,
So I've got one of those
There's nothing wrong
typical
with
IKEA, one of those arty dolls, you know, that people artists use for sketching.
Right,
You can
yeah.
put them in different angles.
Yeah.
Got one behind me, and it's
Just talk
not
to
used.
that.
Actually, I've got one of those tin robots as well. I might
Just talk to it and say, "This
So you
is
need
what
to
I'm
give it a
trying to
name,
do."
though, right?
You've got a whole crew. I mean,
Yeah,
you're going
got two
to get some feedback from that.
people.
Rubber duck.
I'm referring to
All
as
sorts.
things now.
Is there another talk that you saw? Any particular highlights that you want to lift out?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Do you want
So the other talk, while you were seeing the talk about problem solving, me and Elliot went to Building Intelligent Layouts, which is all about CSS Grid by Michelle Barker.
Yep.
And the intro was more about kind of introducing how it works, which I know a little bit about, but it was really, and then she went on to show some real world examples of how it works. And that was really interesting to see how you can use Grid to solve complicated layout problems, and quite a lot to take away from it. So I found that really interesting.
Yeah, it was really good. What was really interesting is when she said at the beginning that we, as developers, we've struggled with that kind of grid process or problem. You know, I remember in the old days it was like tables, which was, you know, that was the way to solve that problem. And then we used floats. But now there's actually a declaration in CSS. Is it CSS3? That can
Just CSS
solve that
Grid.
problem. Yeah, CSS Grid. But we've waited 20 years for this thing to happen. So, yeah, really good.
It's quite a big thing in
I took
itself.
in like 3/4 of it before my brain just got too saturated.
I think that's the way these things work. You have to absorb a few talks, read a few books, listen to a few podcasts, and you know, until
it
these
was
things
brilliant.
resound with you. Yeah.
It's just planting those seeds about, oh, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Because I've done a little bit of Grid, but there was some things that I took away from it that was like, I could try that. And to do what she did in terms of the layout, it's hard to explain, to kind of explain over speech.
No, I think we should have a code demo now.
Get out my laptop.
Doesn't
could
work
go
in
wrong?
audio.
It was
Okay.
interesting.
You're off the hook then.
Now I'm not coming tomorrow. But is there any? Do you want to pull out a couple of talks that you're interested in?
Just
looking
on the spot.
Yeah.
So we've got Graham Arnfield, who's done I've seen quite a lot of his talks on accessibility, and he's spoken at Cheltenham before.
And that's one thing that often gets left behind. It's that last thing you consider when you're developing a
Yeah,
website.
there's
But It's almost the first thing, really.
You should be thinking
There's
about
quite a lot of things. There's Mark talking about building blocks without JavaScript, which I think is going to be about ACF blocks plugin.
Right.
So that might be quite good. There's also talk about keywords and kind of content stuff.
All right.
There's quite a lot. There's a lot of things to take in.
You enjoyed the day so far?
Brilliant, yeah. Also, the company's been marvellous, so
Yeah.
thank you.
How about you? How did you find your first
It's my
WordCamp?
first one. Really good. Yeah, really nice people. It's been nice going and just chatting to everyone and just learning. I love just finding out those little tidbits of information.
It's giving community.
Yeah, it is. It's a really good conference actually. In the price, I've already talked about that. I think we talked about that on the last episode. Price is what, £35. They look after you all day: food, drink, biscuits. We've got some food probably coming soon now. In fact, we're probably blocking.
Probably all gone.
We've come into this. We've come into this special games room where they've got and closed it off. So I don't. We probably should get out.
And everyone's gone.
Especially for us, actually.
Yeah. But it's been really good, and I definitely recommend it to anyone who's a WordPress developer or WordPress curious. Perhaps. Hello, and thanks for listening. You can find more interviews just like this one with fascinating people and covering subjects such as blockchain, marketing automation, SEO, and scaling your business by visiting our website, ratherinventive.com/podcast. But to get the latest episodes the moment they are available, you should subscribe directly in Apple Podcasts, Overcast, or on YouTube. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm @Ben Kinnaird on Twitter, or you can email hello@ratherinventive.com.